He was born on the States and grew up in Iran. He's a serial entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Nas GSV. Welcome to Talk to Walk with Kayvan Baroumand. How did you become like a soccer player?
Well, my father is Iranian and my mother's American, and so I grew up in Iran, and that's where I learned how to play soccer.
How were you in school?
I was a decent student. I went to good schools. I was one of those kids that was always very restless, and I was one of those kids that the teachers always said, "He's a diamond in the rough."
That was good. And then on that time you were playing soccer there?
I was playing soccer every free time I had.
All
in the
right.
morning before school, recess, at lunchtime, after school.
And I know you like to score, right?
Yeah.
You like to score.
I like to score.
So you like to score in entrepreneurship as well?
Absolutely.
As an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely.
Were you an entrepreneur when you were like a child?
No. I gotta say, entrepreneurship is something that came to me later in life. So when I was going to school, and I went to school in UC Irvine, when I graduated from there, the concept of entrepreneurship really did not exist. And so my measurement of success was to look for a job with a large corporation. And so I ended up feeling very fortunate that I got a job at Xerox. And so when I ended up working for Xerox for a number of years. It's not only till after my career in Xerox that I guess the first entrepreneur I really knew was my father,
Right.
who started his own accounting firm. So in that sense, he was an entrepreneur. And it was during that time, really, when Silicon Valley started becoming very popular around entrepreneurship, and some early companies like Sun Microsystems and Cisco, and those companies kind of came out of the university and really was the modern era Silicon Valley success stories.
You think on that time was the time that the entrepreneurial atmosphere changed in the world?
I think that modern Silicon Valley, I mean, you think about it, where did Silicon Valley start, you could say, well, with the semiconductor industry and so forth. But I'd say modern Silicon Valley, which I would allude to probably in the early 80s, is really when it really did make a change, and it's really what changed the world.
So you think an entrepreneur is somebody who born with this spirit, or the atmosphere, the place that he lives can make the person an entrepreneur?
I think both. I think you have to have an entrepreneurial spirit, but you can also succeed more as an entrepreneur in the right environments. To become an entrepreneur, once one decides to become an entrepreneur, there's definitely a certain spirit and attitude that they need to take on. And I do believe that can be taught. I think some people are naturally better entrepreneurs,
Right.
and some environment supports entrepreneurship better, therefore increasing the chances of success. It's just like soccer. I think some people are naturally better soccer players, and in some regions around the world, soccer develops and there's more success around
Brazil.
it. Brazil, Iran, both who are going to be World Cup.
Good,
United States. But actually, I think it can be taught. But once you decide to become an entrepreneur, you do definitely have to behave in a certain way.
Let's go back a little bit. When you first start being an entrepreneur, what was the thing?
My first experience being an entrepreneur was when I was in college. I didn't know I was calling myself an entrepreneur.
Right.
I wanted to come up with a summer job, and I lived on the beach in Newport Beach, Southern California.
Not bad at all.
Not a bad place to live. And I decided, and I happened to be a waiter for the Marriott Hotel, a banquet waiter. And that's how I was making my living to pay for my school and everything else. And obviously being an entrepreneur, I approached the general manager of the Marriott and I said, I would like to provide some services to your guest. And then he says, what kind of services? I said, I would like to rent bikes to them.
Wow.
So that was my first experience becoming an entrepreneur.
And you did it?
Yes, I did it.
Wow.
Where I rented bikes to the Marriott, and then the Marriott basically offered it as a service.
Did you make good money?
No, it was very short-lived.
Did you thought about scaling on that
At that point, no. I was just thinking about having food for my table and some beer money.
That was a good thing. So then, after this first, let's say, experience as an entrepreneur, when was the time that you say, you know what, I have to think in something big?
Yeah. Well, I think what happened with me was I was working for Xerox, and I remember very quickly the day when I decided I was going to become an entrepreneur. I had worked for Xerox for a number of years, and the CEO changed. And when the CEO changed, because Xerox had in their bylaws, they wanted the CEO to retire after the age of 60. And this CEO, who I respected very much, who later became the Secretary of Commerce and Education for the United States, when he left, a new CEO came, and that new CEO basically changed the values of the company. And I remember when I was at Xerox, we would get a card that talked about the corporate priorities. And always, and there was 4 priorities always. Number 1 was always customer satisfaction. Number 2 was always employee satisfaction. And number 3 and 4 flipped every year depending on the priorities of the company. One was increased market share, and the other one was profitability. But when the former CEO resigned, his name is David Kearns, the new CEO came about, and he changed corporate priorities number 2 to become number 3. And so, in other words, instead of employee satisfaction becoming a top priority, it became number 3, and profitability became number 2. And this is at a time when I remember Xerox had the biggest profits in their history. And at that point I realized, and then soon after, they basically laid off thousands of people. And that's when I realized that as much as I felt committed to Xerox, I was still employee 898071. And that was my employee number, which I still remember to this day. And I said, you know what? If a company is no longer loyal to its employees, maybe what I need to do is build my own company. And that's when I decided to start my own company.
With that experience, what have you learned about it?
From becoming an entrepreneur, the transition from large
No, the
corporation.
experience that when they changed the second value to the third position, and the third position profits for the second, and they crashed. So
well, for me, it was a very important decision because it was my first job, my first career, and I had to decide whether or not I was going to be long-term committed or maybe go do my own thing. For me, it kind of helped me realize that the old values of corporations are changing, and that the loyalty of corporations to employees, when they change, then there's really something you need to think about.
before I talk how NestGSV became, tell me 3 core values about the company.
Of ours?
Yes.
Well, we're definitely very much focused on driving value to our community. We also want to basically be associated with smart people. And the third area is something I think that's always core to me, and that's have some fun while I'm in business. So.
I've been here and I see you guys have a lot of fun.
Yeah, but we also work hard.
And I mean, yeah, it kind of works together, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it kind of works together. One thing I found interesting here is like sometimes I feel I'm not working. so I don't know if it's good or not. And then I just go around and say, hey, am I working? I say, of course you're working. We're here. You're like improving your business, so you're working. Oh, okay. So it just looks like I'm having so much fun.
Yeah.
That you think this is the mindset of like Silicon Valley?
I think so. I think the mindset we try to create in this community is to make sure that there's an environment of openness, trust, and environment of collaboration. When you have those components working together, it reduces friction when it comes to work. And therefore, when you're here, I think just like I do, I don't feel like I'm working. I really feel like I'm just spending my day, but at the end of the day, results talk. So I want to make sure that you have friction with results. But
sure, that's it. But it's interesting. So let's go back a little bit and say, how did the idea from NestGSV became?
Yeah. So
came to.
Yeah. So I've been working with entrepreneurs for many years. My first experience came after I was running a company in France. I was running a water company, and the principals there had an investment arm here in Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. So after we sold the company, we said, let's come back to Silicon Valley and we'll figure out what we'll do next. In the interim, there was an investment arm called Amidzad, which was basically in downtown Palo Alto, where Amidzad would make small investments to a number of companies. And secondly, I was very much in favor of entrepreneurial education and development. So after serious thoughts and really, talking to friends and family, I finally decided to start NestGSV. And that's what I did. So NestGSV is really a manifestation of everything that I've learned over the years and putting on a platform where it is global, because we believe entrepreneurship is a global phenomenon, and with a big focus on education and training of the entrepreneur.
So let's talk about this business model. People come here and they rent the place as well. Mm-hmm. But besides only renting the place, mm-hmm. they got mentorship, mm-hmm. they got all different things. Is it pretty much like a unique thing?
How we go about it is unique. What we do is not unique. There are over 2,000...
So the business model is not unique, but the process is unique.
I would say, generally speaking, what we do is unique in the sense that if you put us in general categories of incubation or acceleration, that's not unique. How we are unique is how we approach things globally from day one, and two is how we engage the different entities in the innovation economy together. So typical accelerators and incubators only focus on the startup. We believe that there are more than just one type of entity that gets involved in innovation, and we're that platform that brings them all together. So we're the platform that brings together corporations, startups, governments, and universities together to leverage technology to solve big problems at a global scale. And that's how we're unique.
Perfect. What kind of entrepreneur are you looking forward to see in this community?
I'm looking for entrepreneurs that are driven to make a change in the world for the better. These are people that when you look at them, you look in their eyes, you know that they're there to make a change. And it's not about, there's a certain amount of selflessness, not selfishness, that has to happen, because there's a lot of sacrifices that you're going to make and a lot of sacrifices you're going to ask people to make. And so when you are that entrepreneur, you have to show some selflessness in order to people feel good to give back to what you're doing.
What's the best, let's say, idea that you've heard here in NestGSV so far?
Well, all the ideas are good. It's about who's executing the best, I guess.
That's it.
So I think the most important
walk
thing,
the talk.
Yeah, walk the talk, or talk the walk.
Talk the walk.
The most important thing is really finding the entrepreneur that and the idea that drives him, that keeps him up at night in a positive way, because he can't stop thinking about his business and what he's trying to do and how he's going to go about doing it. And that's why probably the most important component of a startup is the team, not the idea. Because a great team will always make adjustments to their product, but a bad product with a good product with a bad team will be poorly executed, and if it is a poor product, it'll just be dead in the water.
That's it. Talking about innovation, why do you think United States always come with this new thing and new ideas, new business models? Do you think that the environment of the government is something different as well?
Good question. Until this last administration, so the Obama administration, the U.S. government really was not involved at all. I've never gone to the U.S. government for any support. So maybe their lack of support was a good thing, but the fact is that just recently the U.S. government has showed some initiatives which I think will help enable entrepreneurship and innovation. So in our case, we didn't feel we needed the help or the support of the government, but other markets are not as thriving as Silicon Valley. So I could see how the government could act as a catalyst to support it. Now, in our business at NestGSV, we work with a number of governments around the world, and those are primarily our first contacts into the different countries. And the reason why we go to the government first, as long as it is a government that's trustworthy,
right,
is because we want to make sure that the government introduces us to the appropriate organizations that can support innovation. So a government is a good way for us to have them open the doors for us when we set up partnerships. But it's not necessarily that case. You could also set up partnerships with large corporations, individuals, universities, and so forth.
Sure.
But to answer your question, I don't think it's the role of the government that made Silicon Valley unique. And if that's what you're asking,
yes.
I think it's really the soft things about Silicon Valley. It is if you think of the most major startups that have shown success in Silicon Valley, actually the founders are foreign based. You look at Google, Sun, Yahoo, all the founders of these organizations, their families or themselves were born in other countries. It's that spirit of collaboration that makes Silicon Valley unique. Now, what has also happened very early on in Silicon Valley was the funding schemes and platforms available to entrepreneurship and innovation. And I think that also had a significant impact. And because as a result of these investors, they were able to make millions, if not billions of dollars on their return on investment. But another key component are the learning institutions and the role that, for instance, Stanford University has played in the success of Silicon Valley. So I think it's a number of things, but I don't think government really had anything to do with it, except maybe that they did not, because they were not involved, maybe it was,
Maybe that's the thing.
but
that's a good advice for a couple governments, actually.
But I really do see today governments playing a role in terms of being an enabler, maybe putting some seed capital in place to support innovation, but really not managing the process, just more acting as a catalyst to help start the process.
All right. Do you believe in an institutional way of innovation? Like you have here some institutional thing that drive the innovation process?
So I think maybe when you talk about institutionalizing the process, we definitely have a methodology that we use when it comes to innovation. and that is important for efficiency and scale. But if you're talking about institutionalizing from the terms of an institution, I think they also have a role in innovation too. So large corporations and governments typically work very slow, therefore it stifles innovation. However, they're also great enablers when it comes to innovation, and it's really leveraging them for what their strengths are in terms of being the customer of innovation, for creating the customer base, and also maybe even funding innovation and guiding innovation. I think large institutions play a very significant role. But in terms of managing innovation, they are probably one of the worst organizations to do it with.
Do you find yourself innovative?
We have to be.
Not the company, but you yourself.
Am I innovative?
Yeah.
I would always say that innovative companies do two things, or individuals. They listen more, and they think out of the box. So in those cases, I try to listen more, but I'm always thinking out of the box. I would say Kayvan is innovative, yes.
All right. So what's the importance about having a leadership that is innovative?
Right.
So do you believe in a company with a innovation spirit without a leadership innovative?
Yeah. That does not work. Leadership has to come from the top down. And I'll give you an example of one of our partners, Hertz Rental Car. Their new CEO of 6 years. So Hertz is in 150 countries, owns over 1 million vehicles. And Hertz is now positioning themselves as an innovation company. Why? Because that's the message from the CEO. If anyone plans on staying employed at Hertz, will basically follow the orders and the spirit of innovation that Hertz has. And I think that goes the same for any organization. That spirit of innovation has to come from the top. Otherwise, it'll stop at the point where it is not.
How is it building a new project inside the company, or a new product, let's say?
How is it?
Yeah, how is the process for it? Like, you just come for a board and have an idea, say, I have this idea. How does it work?
Well, it depends on what type of product you're talking about. But there's definitely a number of learnings and methodologies that can be used for product development. The whole lean startup methodology that Steve Blank uses. There are many different...
Do you use this?
Well, we're not a product per se, but I actually use the principles, absolutely, of the lean startup.
So you believe in this?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Prototyping and try fast, learn fast.
Right, coming up with a minimal viable product. There's many things. I even take it one step further. Entrepreneurship and an entrepreneurial culture and a large corporation culture in some ways are very different.
Right.
I believe there are things you can learn from a large corporation that you can implement in your startup environment. And those are the things like importance of process, importance of establishing metrics and KPIs, and running the businesses and setting direction of the corporate, setting up the values. Those are things that large corporations spend millions of dollars doing it well. And I think those learnings can be brought to a startup organization, will help them in scaling, minimizing mistakes, and ultimately helping them build successful organizations.
Even the big companies that have this kind of spirit, they are spending less money now, right? With this learning process.
Well,
trying to
naturally,
yeah, exactly. Let's say Google.
Well, Google is a different animal, but yeah, very successful company. But what large corporations are realizing that it is very expensive for them to innovate, and so for that's one of the reasons why large corporations partner with startups today, because they believe that the next big idea may not come from their innovation labs, but may actually come from a startup at NestGSV or maybe any other innovation center.
So do you have this kind of program here?
Absolutely. So we engage with multinational corporations around the world to help them with their innovation strategy. And we have a whole process and methodology around it.
Let's talk about investments. How is the process about when you decide to invest, or when you bring some VC or some angel investor to invest in a company that is inside the community?
Right. Well, that's a really good question, and obviously not every company at NestGSV is going to get funded by every VC.
Sure.
So the most important thing is investors like to create syndicates and want to make sure that there's groups of people together that are going to share the risk with an investment. Today, a lot of activities and programs are changing the investment landscape, like crowdfunding. That has really had probably the single most significant impact on a startup, because now instead of having experts fund a startup, regular people can put in $10, $15, $20 and fund a product. Now that has two benefits. One is engagement, and the second is that having a good marketing strategy today could really help you come up with some either short-term or even some long-term financials without really giving up equity, so to speak.
Let's try to explain here how the rounds works, because sometimes I find that the startups don't really know how it works. So let's go ahead and do it.
So, this is a moving target, right?
Right.
And I said, because of crowdfunding, and really, at least in Silicon Valley, everyone's kind of what I call moving up the food chain, right? So you have individual and friends and family money, which is basically where a lot of startups, start their companies with, and that is anywhere from $5,000 all the way up to a couple $100,000 in investment. And people usually take that sort of money to formalize our concept, build a team, and hopefully come up with a minimal viable product. And what's happening now is that as a result of all the historical success in Silicon Valley, we have more and more angel investors here. What has happened as a result of that is that some of these successful angels are almost acting like early stage venture capitalists. Therefore, these early stage venture capitalists now are acting a little more like later stage venture capitalists, and so everything's being shifted. In the past, what we're seeing a lot that's happening today is this whole concept of the micro VC. So, because there's now a gap between the way angel investors, organized angels, are putting anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million, and VCs are now putting, on average, anywhere between $1 to $5 million. That has kind of left a gap.
Right.
And so as a result of that, we have this whole breed of what we call micro VCs. And these micro VCs are bridging the gap between angel investors and institutional investors. And the nice thing I like about these micro VCs is they're typically partners from larger VC firms that have decided to go on their own, raising $25 to $35 million or $50 million, and kind of positioning themselves in between rounds. So I think that's probably one of the most significant changes over the years. And of course, the second thing really is the whole rise of crowdfunding. I think those two have probably been the most significant impact. The other thing that's also significantly impacting innovation and fundraising is just a sheer volume of companies that are coming as a result of open source, cloud computing, and mobility. So, that's changing the landscape, and really, everyone's coming up with different models, creative models for fundraising and so forth today.
Let's talk about recruiting. Actually, I want to divide this in two terms. First one is, how is your process of recruiting for your company?
Okay. So when I first started in NestGSV, I use professionals. I use people that know how to recruit. So I use professional recruiters to help me build my team.
Okay.
And today, we have professional recruiting partners at NestGSV.
Just to interrupt you, but I'm sorry about that, but just one thing. Sometimes the guy is like building a company and he doesn't really know what kind of people he needs, you know? So how is it working?
Well, I'll give you my example. When I started Nest, I, for the most part, knew what type of person I wanted, but I did not have the time to go and find those people. Some people that I did know, I invited them myself and recruited them, but most of the team, I hired professionals, professional recruiters that I gave them my criteria and they did the filtering for me, and that's how I basically recruited, because you want to make sure that you can hire the best people, and that is really important. And recruiting is very important to any success of any companies. But there's a cost with also hiring professionals. They do cost money in the short run, but in the long run, it's worth it. It's priceless.
What about engagement? Your people, like to get
Keep them
engagement and motivated.
Right. Well, I think the most important thing about that is two things, at least that I do. One is communicate the vision and the direction of the company constantly to the team. And the second is empowering your team. As I'm building a global organization, I know that I cannot be involved in every decision.
Sure.
So when you hire the right people, you have to trust that the people that you hire can make the right decisions on behalf of the company. And that's the whole concept of empowerment. And obviously communicating the vision and the direction of the company so that the decisions that they make in terms of whatever business decisions they're making is in line with the direction of the company and the vision of the company.
Very good. What about recruiting the people and the startups that are coming here? How is this process?
So we do a number of things. We do a number of what I call push and pull activities. The push activities are our newsletters that we send out, are the events that we do, the activities that we do, the social functions that we have. The pull activities are really kind of more from a referral perspective, our selection process of selecting companies to join our community, and really doing everything, from an education perspective. So when we educate the entrepreneur, we know that people that are attracted to becoming better skilled are really the profiles of the companies. So as we set up these educational workshops, that's one way of doing it. Really, the other way is through a lot of affiliate partnerships that we have. So we allow third-party organizations to utilize our facilities, and as they do that, that becomes a platform for us to recruit other companies and so forth. And then, of course, the third, otherwise, large organizations that use our facilities for events and conferences is another way of attracting. So between referrals, our events, outside party events, our educational workshops, those are different ways that, we attract talent.
And how do you see that the company is a good company to be here? What kind of metrics?
So before any company moves in here, so we have a team that goes and sources the companies every week, and every week the senior management team sits down with the company just to make sure that we understand what they're trying to achieve, what the company's trying to achieve, how complete the team is, where they are from their product development, what they need in terms of resources. And that first engagement, which typically is 30 to 45 minutes with that company, is of value to both entities, both to the startup because they see that they're dealing with an experienced team, and of course to us, that we know the caliber of companies that are coming in here, and for us to better understand what resources we can provide to help support the company.
Very good. Okay, we're getting here on the end of this conversation.
Okay.
And I want to ask you short questions to shortness. Okay. United States. What do you think about it?
Global power.
Brazil.
Global power.
That was funny. Soccer.
Global sport. Global passion.
Family.
Key to everything.
Friends.
Key to everything.
Hands-on.
Hands-on? A link to everything.
That was a good answer. Hey, thanks for being with us, and I mean, for all this partnership, and of course, you were my first guy here in Talk to Walk. So this is the first show that is coming up on the new platform on HandsOn.TV.
Great.
So I'm very happy to be here with you. I was very excited to do this show, and I pretty much think we did a good job.
I think you're doing a great job. You're doing something great for entrepreneurs and people globally, so we're very happy to be part of this process.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This is Kayvan. I'll see you next round.